All right, welcome back. That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. I'm recording this Friday morning. Jarrod is over there, Australia, at night. He's sipping on some wine, I think. Today is September 4th. September 4th, we're going to dive into some NBA playoffs. I almost said I'm not recording today after that last-second shot by the Raptors last night. I almost said, screw this, I'm not recording this.
Don't sook it up, Trey. That was a hell of a game. That was a hell of a game.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right, we're, half second away from being up 3-0. Get Toronto out of town. And,
It's made it a series, and that's what we want. This is two. We're already jumbling up our order tonight, but these are two really, really good sides, Toronto and Boston. And to see it go a sweep or a gentleman's sweep, I know you as a Boston fan probably don't want to hear this, but it would be a shame for the rest of us, for the neutrals, if that was a 4 or 5 game series. If this thing goes 6 or 7, we're guaranteed to have a really good series out of it. So I'm okay with Toronto pulling this one out.
Let's try to do the order we planned here. We're gonna break this up into 2 parts here. The first part being the teams that were eliminated in the first round. The second part being the teams that are still remaining, or the second round teams. So I wanted to start with Indiana, Nate McMillan. How do you go into that offseason, Indiana, and say, you know what our problem is? Nate McMillan.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. For the record, I think McMillan has done a really, really good job with the tools that he's had at his disposal. You look at his regular season record, it's like 183, 136, 134, something like that. He's averaging around 45, 46, 47 wins per season across a normal season. And when you throw in the injuries that he's had to deal with, the roster upheaval that he's had to deal with, remember he came into this side, or 4 years ago, they had Paul George. And you almost forget that Paul George is on Indiana now with everything that's happened. But if you just look at this year, Sabonis has missed 11 games and didn't come to Orlando. Turner missed 11 games. Brogdon missed 19 or 20 games. And I don't think he was in the bubble at all, was he? I don't think he came down. Did he play playoffs? I can't recall.
I
That's
watched
how interesting
maybe
the
5
Indiana
minutes
series
of that
was. Yeah, it was shockingly boring, that series. Jeremy Lamb went down and didn't play after his leg injury. Depot came back, but geez, what is he, 50, 60% of his usual self? This is a team that has not been together. In that sense, I think he's done really well. But at the same time, I mentioned that, mid to high 40s, really consistent win ratio that he's had. He is a coach that will raise your floor, but he's not a coach that's going to raise your ceiling. He's made the playoffs every season in Indiana and been knocked out in the first round. 1 7-game series, 3 sweeps. He's just not. I hate to say it because he sounds like the loveliest guy, and he is a good coach. There's no doubt about that. I just don't think he's the sort of coach that can take you over the top. I kind of see this as the Pacers version of Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr. They're hoping for another coach to come in and not necessarily make them a championship contender, but take them from regular first round fodder to somebody that can get to the second round and maybe do a Portland and sneak a conference finals out of it.
Yeah, when I just look at Indiana, I'm sitting there and like, okay, what's their ceiling? That was probably their ceiling. I just don't think they're any better than that. Like, what is firing Nate McMillan going to solve for you?
The talent is there, and I do feel sorry for McMillan getting fired after this season because of all the upheaval he's had through this season, and particularly late in the season. But I just don't think he's the coach that can take them any further. I think he is the coach that has instilled all these defensive philosophies and principles into them. He's got them playing really unselfish offense. But I don't think he's creative enough to try and or to conjure up something more than what the collection of parts are. There's a series I want to touch on later that's got a really good example of a very good coach that can't take his team further, that can't create magic against a coach that constantly makes his teams better than what they are. But we'll get to that later. But I think McMillan is the perfect example of a really good, solid coach, but that's all he'll ever be, a really good, solid coach.
When I look at Indiana, I think, okay, it looks like Oladipo may leave or may not leave. Sabonis is there, but like if Oladipo's gone, you're not looking at a good team anymore. Like you could be looking at a whole new rebuild.
You very well could, but at the same time, is Oladipo going to be Oladipo? I want to put a fake trade to you, and I can't take credit for this. This comes from a good friend of mine, the Australian basketball writer Tom Hertz, who is a mad Indiana fan, and he put this out there to a bunch of us: Depot for LeVert.
Like straight up?
He said we can, fiddle around the edges, but who, does Brooklyn go for that quote unquote third star and trade LeVert while he's at his peak?
I think I would.
Or peak of his value, at least.
I'm not gonna lie. I think I would do it for Indiana. Because
I think so as well.
I like LeVert's contract a lot too.
Yeah, that helps. He will have to get paid, and Depot at his best is underpaid, frankly. But again, we need to see it. We've seen, and this isn't really fair on Oladipo, we've seen a small patch of him coming back, then we have the stoppage, then we see a small patch of Orlando bubble action. He hasn't really had continuity since he's come back, but geez, from what we've seen, Trey, I'm not confident. I'd hate to say it, and I really love to be wrong on this, but I'm not confident that Oladipo is going to be what he was in the 2018 season again. I'm not sure he's got the physicality, the pure athleticism left to do it.
I'm probably with you. So again, this is That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. We're trying this on video version this time with Jarrod. You can see him. I think you have a new Twitter handle too.
Yeah, I think I change it up every year. I get bored with it and change it after a while. So it's hey JP, or hey it's JP, but with a bunch of underscores thrown in. People can find it. Just look up my name.
There we go. Jarrod Prosser. I'm Trey Daubert. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're getting there. Almost at 100. Anyway, we've talked about this in the past, but we're going to circle back. The mess that is the 76ers. Brett Brown officially got fired, but from what Elton Brand has said, it doesn't look like any major changes are coming, which I guess you're kind of stuck with that roster anyway. But yeah. I just don't see them getting any better. I think this is who they are.
They've sort of tied themselves to some pretty onerous contracts, Harris and Horford in particular. For those who aren't aware, Trey and I spoke about this on NBA Shorts about a week and a half ago, I believe. It was just after Philly got knocked out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So you can always go back and get our thoughts on that as well. But first of all, a bit of a shout out to my man Brown. As you know, Trey, I'm a massive Brett Brown fan. I have been since the mid-90s when he coached the National Basketball League team, the Australian League team that I supported when they existed. He has his flaws, no doubt. He's slow to make adjustments. He's not always the most creative with his offense, although, geez, you'd have to be a mad scientist to come up with a functional offense with what they have. But at the same time, he did deserve his chance to try and win after going through the process. And I think he did well. You think last season, if it wasn't for that 4-bounce miracle shot of Kawhi's, they may have gotten to the conference finals, and Embiid and Simmons might have been too much for that Orlando team who really flaked it. Milwaukee team who really flaked it late on in the conference finals. So, sliding doors, that shot misses. We could be talking about a very different Sixers side and a very different Brett Brown. You're right, though, in Elton Brand seems to want to see what his roster can do, and I don't mind that. There's been so much upheaval in that front office that Brand, I'm not convinced he's the right guy, but he deserves the chance to fuck up. He deserves the chance to make it good, or he deserves the chance to royally screw it. They need a little bit of stability. There's a common thing that happens in soccer. I'm sure Gavin, one of our other writers, Gavin Daly, can explain this to you, where boards of soccer clubs get impatient with their managers and fire them 18 months after 18 months after 18 months. So this manager brings in his players at costs of tens, sometimes hundreds of millions. They fire him 18 months later. Half of those players don't suit the playing style of the new manager. So you have to go and spend another 80 million to go and replace those players. You do that for 3 or 4 managers, 5 or 6 years down the line, you've got a bloated roster that half of them aren't playing and they're on ridiculous wages. This is a smaller version of this because of the salary cap, but we've got almost 3 teams within one. We've got a little bit of Hinkey's vision. We've got a little bit of Colangelo's vision. We've got a little bit of Brand's vision. And it just doesn't work. It's an absolute hodgepodge.
I think we have a lot of Brand's vision. I think the Al Horford thing was all Elton Brand. He saw, let's get a guy who can go down low and score and just kind of tough and rugged. And I think he's the piece that just doesn't work.
Yeah, I didn't mind the theory of it when it happened. If Horford could hit enough threes and play make from the top of the key well enough, then, and he didn't have to be an all-star on offense, but his ability to play defense alongside Embiid, and importantly when Embiid sat, I thought it made the risk worth it, even at his age, and the back end of that contract was going to age badly no matter what. What a lot of people didn't anticipate, myself included, was the very first year of that contract aging badly. It just hasn't worked. And I hate to say it because I love Big Al, but he's
shot.
He just looks a step slower than he was in Boston.
I just think Elton Brand has built a team where the rest of the league has gone small, athletic. Like we saw in that Boston series, Jaylen Brown killed Al Horford every single time down the floor, whether it was offensively or defensively. And there were times where Al Horford has to win the Semi Ojeleye matchup. He has to dominate him in the post. That has to happen. You can't pay him $30-some million and for him to be a zero against Semi Ojeleye.
And I understand getting beaten by Brown. That's just a horrible matchup for Horford. But yes, when you start losing one-on-one battles to Semi Ojeleye, that is a sure sign that the aging process is rapidly catching up with you. If they'd had, because ultimately I think Tobias Harris is a 4 as well. So they've got arguably the best center in the league, a former All-Star 4/5 in Horford, and an excellent, if overpaid, 4 in Harris. But that means they've got, and Simmons is probably a 4 as well. He just happens to be a playmaking 4. But they've got no small forwards.
Or real shooters.
No, that's the thing. Their guards aren't really knockdown shooters. Even Milton is inconsistent. But they've literally got no threes on the roster that I can think of. Robinson, Burks. I can't think. Seriously, I can't think of a 3 that they've got on that roster. And it's so horridly, horridly unbalanced. And I understand zigging when everybody else is zagging, that there is a merit to that. But you've got to have the right tools in place. Embiid, for all of his talk at the beginning of the season about getting super fit and becoming the defensive player of the year, hasn't happened. All the talk of Simmons taking and making threes, he made 2 on the season. And
he probably took that number too.
Did you put money on it?
No, I'm saying he probably had 2 attempts all year too, or 3 or 4.
He had something like 8 or 9 or something like that. So
and part of making him's got to take him though.
Well, that's the thing. You what's the saying? You miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
But it's a shockingly put together roster, and that's where I wouldn't mind giving Brand another season just to see whether he can swing something. Draft a guard, find a guard off free agency. This is the first time that Brand is selecting his own coach as well. There may have been some sort of disconnect between Brand and Brown that we don't know about. So I think Brand deserves a shot. I'm not convinced he's the right guy, but he deserves the shot to at least screw it up first before we all condemn him.
there's just two things that tell me this guy just doesn't get it. The Horford one was one, but the Tobias Harris trade, you can't give up 2 first-round picks, Landry Shamet, who is your only knockdown shooter, and then pay for basically his bird rights, because we all knew the Clippers weren't going to re-sign Tobias Harris anyway. That trade is indefensible.
Oh, it was. It smacks of a rookie GM trying to make his mark and got worked over by Frank and Jerry West. And it's like, of all the people for a rookie GM to run into, it's like stepping into a casino the first time and running into a card shark. You know, he was always going to get taken to the cleaners. Was Redick on the team when that trade was made? Was he still with the Sixers?
He was.
Okay. So in that sense, putting Shamet into the trade is defensible, but then not re-signing Redick.
Right.
Yeah. If you're going to get rid of one shooter, you should expect to keep the other. But to lose both of them, that was indefensible.
Let's go to your team. You can kind of take the lead here. That was a wild Game 7 between Utah and Denver.
Man, that was the sort. I'm still emotional about that.
You kind of saw it coming too.
It was, yeah. Look, I just had a feeling that with Gary Harris back that Denver would have just enough defense. He's the perfect player to guard Donovan Mitchell. He's just that little bit bigger. He's clearly not as athletic as Mitchell. Few players are, but he's just that little bit bigger, just that little bit stronger. His anticipation in his footwork is exemplary. He's a wonderful defensive player. It's a shame he's forgotten how to shoot, but putting him back into that team, even if he can't shoot, Jamal Murray he could have swallowed the ball and belched it up and it would have went in through that series. So you didn't need Harris to shoot. I did have a feeling with Harris back, though, that Utah would struggle. I still thought with a 3-1 lead they should win the series, but shit happens, I suppose. Now, you did ask the question before we came on air, what do Utah do? Do they look to trade one of the stars? Do they rebuild around them? I think for next season, you've got to run it back. The team outside of Mitchell and to a lesser degree Gobert is suddenly very old. Ingles is 32, Conley's 32. This is a team, Bogdanovic is 31. This is a team that its star players aren't particularly young outside of Mitchell. The big thing that they're missing is depth, which, and I still can't believe I'm saying this, it makes re-signing Jordan Clarkson vital.
Yeah.
2020, man. I mean, that's probably the most ludicrous thing of 2020, that Jordan Clarkson has become a vital NBA player for a pseudo contender. Utah they've got 6, maybe 7 really, really good players, but they've got nothing beyond that. And we saw that in that Denver series. As soon as Tony Bradley checked into the game, Jokic turned into like some Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar hybrid. But against Gobert, for most of the series, he was stifled. I still think, I think Conley, he's a year older, but we saw late in the season, in the bubble in particular, he finally found his rhythm. He finally found his connection with Gobert. Do you think it's the first time he's had an above ground center since probably Brandon Wright? I can't think of another
Gasol
guy.
Was pretty good.
Yeah, but he wasn't an above ground guy. He was a pick and pop guy, or he was a short roll guy.
The only name I could even think of.
Yeah, but outside of Brandon Wright, I can't think of another Memphis center through Conley's time where you could just throw it up there and he would go get it. So it took Conley a little while to adjust, and he's had 5, 6, 7 years of playing a particular way. It did take him a while to adjust. I think a non-injury interrupted season from Conley will be huge. Same with Bogdanovic. Again, they're getting older, so that's always dicey. But the biggest reason that you run this back is that this season, through the regular season, Donovan Mitchell was really, really good. But in the playoffs, he became a star, a genuine superstar. 36-5, fair enough, it's only one series, but 36-5-5, unreal splits, unsustainable splits, frankly. Throw in a steal, if he can maintain somewhere between his regular season production and that playoff production, you've got a genuine top 15 player in the NBA. And that is the sort of thing that can elevate Utah from, when healthy, a second round contender to a potential conference finalist. And from there, sometimes you just need some dominoes to fall your way.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that Mitchell is indispensable. He is definitely a guy where you hand him the max, you just set it, forget it, that's it. But it's really the pieces around him to me, because I was going to say, yes, this Utah team's old, but Mike Conley seems like an old 32. Like not like a Chris Paul 32, or Chris Paul's like 35 and playing his ass off. Conley seems like an old 32.
He did through the season, but his play in the bubble, and I got to admit, I was thinking, oh, geez, we've been sold a bit of a lemon here. Memphis knew he was on the way out, but his play in the bubble restored a bit of faith for me. He was excellent. He was spry. His shooting comes and goes, but his shooting has kind of always been that way. He's always been a little bit streaky. But I think that year of getting used to a new system, and it's a very different system. Utah's system, Snyder's system, is so much more intricate than the old Memphis offenses. So it did take him a while to break the habits of a professional lifetime. I think Conley will make a huge difference. And I think he's getting used to playing off the ball as well. This is the first time in his, well, really forever, because he would have been the main guy at high school. He was certainly the main ball handler at college, and he's ran the point exclusively for, what's he been in the league, 12 years, 13 years?
Long ass time.
Yeah. So this is the first time he's ever played off the ball. So his play in the bubble was really encouraging. It looks like he had finally adapted to I guess, a whole new way of playing the sport. So I think Utah has to run it back. Snyder is a genius of a coach, so you need to give him a chance to see what he can do as well. The big thing for Utah is finding a better supporting crew. That's on Dennis Lindsay. I don't know how he's going to do it. Once Mitchell's paid, there's really no money left in the cap. This is where the massive whiff on Dante Exum hurts so much. Even if he turned into a guy who was the equivalent of a late lottery pick rather than a top 5, that could make all the difference to Utah's guard rotation, to their wing rotation. But him being as disappointing as he is, that's just been a huge loss for Utah.
I watched a good number of the games, and my takeaway was they got up 3-0 and they kind of ran out of gas because they don't have enough guys.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You're trotting out George Niang. He wanted to make me vomit. That needed to stop.
Niang's my man. I love George Niang. That stroke is so pure. I love watching him shoot. You could time his movements with the sundial, yeah. But he fills a role. He's smart. He knows how to play his role, and he can shoot the hell out of the ball.
He would drive me nuts.
Just so slow.
Like Kyle Anderson. He would drive me insane to watch.
But Kyle Anderson looks like he should be quick. He's long, he's lithe. It's almost like you're thinking he's playing at 50%. Niang moves at the same pace, but he's going at 100%. No, I love George Niang. He's probably overstretched in the role that he had to take on this season. And again, that comes down to that lack of depth. But I think he has earned his spot as a deep rotation guy in the NBA. I'm a fan of his.
Dallas Mavericks, how do they find their third guy? Because it seems like forever they have swung and missed in free agency. And I'm not quite sure why, because it's a big market with no state tax, which should be a key. And they got Mark Cuban, who's a good owner, and Rick Carlisle. And for whatever reason, they haven't gotten the big fish in free agency.
Well, I looked at this question when you put it to me, and I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. The one answer that came to mind, and I haven't worked out what the package would be, but assuming Brooklyn looks to trade LeVert and or Dinwiddie, do they look to be in those sweepstakes? I don't know what they trade. They'd have to trade Hardaway plus X, Y, and Z. But the other way to think about it is, do they need to? We're almost past the era of the big three. We're into the era of the big two now. Kawhi and PG, LeBron and AD, Giannis and to a degree Middleton, KD and Kyrie. You like this one, Harden and Westbrook.
We'll get there.
But,
don't worry.
But do they need a genuine quote unquote star to be that third wheel? Because that third wheel, we saw it with Chris Bosh. He goes from being a superstar producer to being a catch and shoot player, a guy who doesn't really do much, plays good defense, but is a complementary player on offense. They've already got a brilliant complementary player in Tim Hardaway Jr. He doesn't require the ball. He doesn't want the ball all the time to play make, but he'll stand outside. He'll make 40% of his threes, and he's got just enough game off the bounce to compensate for a hard closeout. Ideally, he would be a better defensive player, but if he was a better defensive player, he'd be Jaylen Brown. So, you'd have your third star. I would question whether they really need to, or whether they just need a little bit more, a little bit more maturation of their two superstars and getting Dwight Powell back. Luka and Dwight Powell have a wonderful chemistry, and they really missed his rim running, because for all of what Porzingis can do, he's not somebody who's a screen and roll type of guy. He's a pick and pop guy.
Yeah, when I look at their team, it's like, okay, how do I get Luka a championship? I need one more piece. I don't know what that piece is, but I need one more piece. I get the biggest X factor to me is Porzingis needs to stay healthy.
Oh yeah,
he needs to be on the floor.
Healthy. Yeah. Well, you got a sweet 3-point shooting, 7'3" shot blocking menace. He doesn't roll to the rim. He's for a 7'3" guy. I've never seen a 7'3" guy with a worse post-up game than Porzingis. It's horrible. But, when you're 7'3" with a high release and you can stroke the three the way he does, who needs to post up,
The trade for Dallas was a no-brainer. You make that trade 10 times out of 10 times.
Yeah.
But it's like we don't have a really long history of 7'3" guys staying healthy.
No, we don't. I was outside of Kareem. I really couldn't name anybody who was, say, 7'2" and above, who played 12 plus years of big NBA minutes and didn't suffer a series of injuries. And the worrying thing is that Porzingis has already had all these at a relatively young age. He might be somebody who matures into his body. And again, we're looking at guards here, but someone like Steph Curry, who had all these problems, and he, outside of a contact injury with his hand or his thumb, he hasn't really had an injury problem or significant injury problem for years now. But you're right, big guys, when they're already getting these sort of injuries, it's pretty concerning. He could be, he could be like all of those different Portland centers that we've seen, Oden and Bowie and Walton over the years. It's a worry. But you're right, if he stays healthy, the sky's the limit for this team. They're still so young. They're still really, really young. Even Seth Curry, he's only 29, 30. No, he's
29, I think.
He's still got probably 5 years left in him, because he's not an athletic marvel. He's a straight-out shooter. Hardaway's still relatively young. He's 27. Powell, I really hope he can come back from that injury, but he's still quite young. They've got Willie Cauley-Stein, who's got pedigree. If Powell doesn't happen to come back as well as he does, they've found something in Trey Burke. I don't know how they did it, but they've turned Trey Burke into an actual NBA player. They've got Delon Wright, who they don't really use. They could trade him for something.
Yeah, I think the most encouraging part is Porzingis was actually tough. In the past, I felt like he's soft, and while his post-up game isn't what it should be, it felt like he was gritty. He got ejected that one game. I want to see more of that. I want to see him dominating more.
He's like most of the Europeans, he's a hard bastard. Like he is the last bloke I would want to see in a dark alley. He would he'd cut you and wouldn't think twice, I reckon. I really like Porzingis. I'm just worried about those legs. And maybe that's the reason he doesn't post up. He always looks unbalanced in the post. you see some guys like Olajuwon, or even going back to McHale, who it looks like you could hit them with a 4x2 and they wouldn't fall over. Not because they're super strong. It's because they've just got a ballet dancer's balance. Porzingis looks like he could fall over when he's doing a spin move in the post with a stiff breeze. So maybe that's confidence in his legs. Maybe that's a physiological issue where his legs just aren't quite aligned properly or something. I don't know. I do like... I think they need to find another centre, whether that's Powell or someone else, for when Porzingis goes down.
So you don't love
another
Boban.
Stretch centre. Yeah, Boban and Kleber, for all of their good and for all of Boban's interviewing abilities, they're just not. They're not nearly a facsimile of KP. Just think about that third star thing though. If they do trade for someone, I mentioned Levert. Who else would be a good third star, knowing that they wouldn't get a lot of the ball? They'd be a secondary ball handler. So they'd have to be able to create off the bounce, but they'd have to be able to spot up. They'd have to be able to play good defense. Who would be out there that would be a good option for Dallas?
That's a good question, and exactly why I posed the question, because I've had a hard time thinking of it. I was looking down like DeMar DeRozan. Nope, that one's not going to work.
No. I honestly can't think of a guy who would.
I would love,
down to the
and this will be the next topic, but I would love to see like a CJ McCollum in there.
Yeah, that'd be good actually, because he would have at least some size next to him in the backcourt for the first time in his career. That's a good one actually. I don't think they would trade him, not while Lillard's got any sort of prime left.
Right.
But a player like him would be really interesting. Would Jordan Clarkson? How would he go there? He's an unrestricted. No, seriously,
he's not.
He's an
nearly
unrestricted
as good,
free
though.
agent.
Yeah,
he is someone who can. Defensively, he's a sieve, so that wouldn't suit the other end of the floor. But he is somebody who can catch and shoot, and when he's on, he's lights out. He's got all sorts of game off the bounce, and he's got boundless confidence. You could let him run a team for 5 minutes with Luka on the bench, and he might get you 12 points and 3 assists in that 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't have all the names on that 2021 free agent class, but I know Dallas has a max spot, and it's going to be the last time they ever have a max spot before they pay Luka. I think you got to keep your options open there.
I didn't realize they had a max slot. That throws a lot of things out there, doesn't it?
Right.
Anthony Davis. Why the hell not?
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who would suit there, who would be available off the top of my head.
Let's get to Portland here. And the perception around Terry Stotts has been pretty good. He's well regarded. I think he had a terrible series. He played his guys way too many minutes. It was like a 6-7 man rotation. You got Wenyen Gabriel who starts and then he never sees the floor. He had 4 minutes one game, like running his guys into the ground. There was a game, I think it was game 2. They're down like 25. Lillard still out there deep in the third quarter, gets hurt. I thought he had a bad series. He ran his guys into the ground. They had nothing left.
Yeah, they did. And Nurkic was probably the embodiment of that. Like, he looked magnificent in the seeding games.
Yeah.
Like, what was he? He's like 17 and 12 with 4 assists, 2 blocks a game. And he dropped back to about like 12 and 10, 3 assists. And I think he averaged something like 0.2 of a block per game in the playoffs.
Nurkic looked like he was stranded in the middle of a desert without any food or water for a week.
Yeah. Well, it's to be expected. I mean, he's had essentially 14 months off. So he was never going to be in game shape. But I feel for Stotts a little bit in that, we talked about Utah not having any depth whatsoever outside of that 7-man rotation. Portland had less. Carmelo wasn't in the league halfway through this season, and he was playing 30 minutes a game for them. Gary Trent was an afterthought. You mentioned Wenyen Gabriel. There's a reason he played 4 minutes and never saw the court again. He's just not that good. Yeah, and they had to start him. These guys just had no depth whatsoever, especially once Collins, he proved to be not quite right when he came back and then got hurt again. But you throw him, and he was expected to be a big part of that rotation in Orlando. But you throw him there, you throw Ariza and Hood still not ready. What's the young fella's name off the bench? The other young guard.
Anthony Simons, who's not ready.
Simons, yes. Anthony Simons. Yeah, he was clearly not ready. So Stotts, he was caught between a rock and a hard place where he trusted his deeper rotation guys, and they would they were deer in the headlights. They had no idea what to do. So we sort of had to roll the dice and say, well, fuck it. We're the 8th seed. We're going to live and die with our stars. And they died with their stars. I agree they played him too much, but I'm not sure what choice he had outside of hoping, fingers crossed, that his young guys stepped up.
Yeah, I just think it was crazy that, like, Nurkic can't be on the floor for 36 minutes.
Oh, God, no.
Like,
even fully healthy, I don't think he can.
Then I know you're going to lose. Like, go down at least, like, with a fight here. Not, like, running your guys into the ground like they're dead.
And that was probably the one position where he could substitute out because he has Hassan Whiteside. And I know he played them together at times, and the Lakers are probably the only team, maybe Milwaukee, where you can play both of those guys together. But, yeah, I mean, when he's clearly gassed, play Melo at the 4, play Whiteside at the 5, run 3 guards.
Yeah.
Run a shooting lineup and let Whiteside roll to the rim. So I think he could have coached better. He didn't have a stack of chips on the table, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. The question here is Portland's an 8 seed, but we kind of somehow expected better, but now they're kind of back as, okay, we got killed as an 8 seed. Do they make any significant changes here? Because they've been running the same McCollum-Lillard thing out forever, and they just never seem to advance for far into the playoffs.
I think they give it one more year. Nurkic is back. They'll have Hood back. They've got Melo in, and as much as we all bag Carmelo, he has genuinely been. He's certainly been better than what anybody expected. But
I couldn't believe it.
He's been good. He's been really good. We all talked about Olympic Melo going to OKC. We've finally seen Olympic Melo. He catches, he shoots, he plays the best defense that he possibly can. He kicks the ball on when there's no shot. There's none of this 15-second pounding the rock, 3 dribbles, turn around at the elbow. Yeah,
I would have bet my life that would have been him in Portland.
Oh, I honestly didn't think. He's always had this ability to be a role player in him. His game is perfectly suited to it. It was the mental side of it, whether he accepted that he was a role player. And I think that year out of the league has humbled him, for want of a better word. And he's come back with a whole new mindset, and all credit to the man. He has stepped into a role that suits where he is in his career, where he didn't in his previous couple of stops. I do think they run it back simply because they're going to get so many more players back, including getting Nurkic for a whole season, Collins for more than 3 healthy games.
Well, that's a maybe, though.
Yeah, that's true. Well, all things being equal. Yeah. But with all these teams improving, Phoenix is improving, New Orleans, Memphis, they'll all have expectations to make the playoffs next season. Minnesota is going to want to make a push as well with all of their players and draft picks coming through. There is a very, very strong possibility that Portland gets everybody back and still doesn't make the playoffs.
Right. So, which is kind of wasn't fair to them this year, but
this year was completely different. They were screwed from the get-go once all these players went down and Nurkic didn't even start the season. But if they get to early January, mid-January next season, or whatever the equivalent of usual mid-January will be, say 6 weeks before the trade deadline next season, if they're sitting in 9th or 10th, do they look to blow it up? Do they sit there and go,
you got to do something?
Yeah, that's it. That might be the catalyst where they go, well, we've got everybody back and we're still nowhere near good enough. So McCollum can, that's where Dallas might look to trade for McCollum, or Brooklyn might look to trade for McCollum. They might, fandangle a second rounder out of LA and send Carmelo to the
Philadelphia
Lakers
needs
for a
McCollum.
reunion.
Philadelphia needs
Oh yeah,
McCollum.
he'd be so good there. He'd be perfect there.
Yeah.
There you go. Horford and a sweet first rounder. There you go.
Might need more than that.
Yeah, no, look, I like that idea. I like that McCollum to Philly idea. That'd be good.
How about let's go to, and we can transition into the part 2 after this, but Oklahoma City. I wanted them to win so bad. You go back and you really look at this series. Houston went 7 games with a team they gave 2 first-round picks to, 2 first-round swaps, and an Oklahoma City team that got 6 first-round picks for Paul George, a first-round pick for Jeremy Grant, in a year where they didn't care if they won or lost.
Yeah, it's I actually think this has worked out so well for OKC because you look at what happened with Philly with the process where it took years to rebuild the culture despite having all these wonderful first-round picks. What's happening in OKC is they're going to get all of these first-round picks from the Clippers and Houston. And fair enough, they're all going to be top picks, but they've got a winning culture to back it up. All these guys are going to come in and they're going to have Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari and Steven Adams showing them the right ways to be professionals. They're passing it on to Schroeder and Gilgeous-Alexander, and those guys are going to pass it on to all these rookies that come in. Presti has played this absolutely perfectly. I don't know whether he meant to play it like this, but it has worked out so well for him. Yeah, this is it might just be a happy accident, but credit where it's due. He's picked up every asset under the sun, and he's still got a really, really good basketball team beneath him.
It's the closest thing to the Celtics-Nets trade.
Yeah.
Since. By far.
Yep.
The question I have is, you're going to get to a point where the team's somehow competitive, but at the same time, if you can move Chris Paul for an asset, you do it. If you can move some of these older guys, you do it. But you're competitive at the same time. It's kind of weird.
I honestly think Chris Paul will have one more year in OKC. OKC will find a way to pick up one of these gazillion point guards that are projected to be first-round picks. They'll let them learn from the point guard, and then they'll say, right, you're 73 years old now, Chris Paul. We're going to trade you for whatever we can get.
To the Knicks.
Yeah. for 4 first-rounders or something. No, Chris Paul shoots too well for a Thibodeau point guard. He won't go to the Knicks.
It'll be that year he falls apart, though.
Yes. You could just imagine like 37-year-old Chris Paul playing 42 minutes a game. He might actually come apart on the court like a Meccano set or something. Look, I can't say enough about how Sam Presti has played this. He's got a winning basketball team. He's got the culture, and he's got all the draft picks, every single one of them. It's almost like he's picking 1 through 17 every draft for the next 6 years. But onto the series itself, we mentioned that utterly mental finish between Utah and Denver. That last game between OKC and Houston just looked up and said, yeah, hold my Gatorade, motherfuckers. But that was nuts. That was absolutely nuts.
I have a lot of things on it. First of all, like all the people that criticize Lou Dort, screw you. I love that guy. I absolutely love that guy. You need guys like that on your team. I'm not saying he's got to be a star or even a starter, but the way he defended James Harden, how can you not love that guy? And for him to drop 30, I don't care. Like, I will take that every day of the week.
This was the beautiful paradox of this game. Lou Dort is there to defend the best one-on-one scorer in the last, the best one-on-one scorer that's played in the last 25 years, really.
And did a hell of a job.
Yeah, and he did. He really did well. But in that game 7, Lou Dort hits 30 points. He takes more shots than any other player on the floor. And ultimately, James freaking Harden made a defensive play on him to save the game. But that game was completely backwards.
And otherwise, they probably would have had the ball, but his foot was out of bounds.
Yes.
on the rebound.
The refereeing in this in the bubble, that's a whole different topic. We could spend another pod on that by itself, Trey.
The
But
biggest win for OKC is I can't believe how good Gilgeous-Alexander is. And
yeah,
I knew he's a piece that they wanted, and it's a piece that, if you're looking for something for Paul George, okay, there's a young player that we like. But for him to flourish into what he's been is a huge win.
as a two guard as well. I thought he was going to be a really good, solid. He might top out as a borderline all-star point guard. He just didn't quite have the burst, the athleticism. He's almost like a B+ at everything.
I didn't see that at Kentucky. I didn't see this.
No, and especially playing off the ball, he's become a better two guard than he is a point guard, and yeah, I certainly didn't pick that. The series itself. Look, within our Vendetta community, for those who don't know, Trey is not exactly the biggest cheerleader for Russell Westbrook. We've had a lot of conversations in amongst the Vendetta community about Westbrook and his influence on that series once he came back. And Trey, I just want to give you the floor about what you thought of Westbrook's play in those last few games once he came back from injury.
Well, the first game, he was just completely awful. His typical 3 of 13, inefficient, making dumb decisions. The biggest problem, there's two big problems I have. Number one, he can't shoot, and it affects the rest of the guys around him to where they don't respect his jump shot. The help defense can go all over the place, and they can't rely on him to just, if you play for Mike D'Antoni in Houston, you have to make a three. And they've somehow made this certain exception. Well, Russ doesn't have to hit a three. He can just kind of do his thing and kind of run around like a lightning bug. But at the same time, we'll allow him to make 5 turnovers a game because that's what he does. It's just, I don't get it. It just doesn't make any sense. To me, Chris Paul, we've seen this now. Chris Paul was a much better fit with James Harden. I don't think that's deniable at this point.
It's not. And having Westbrook, maybe this is the plan all along, I don't know, but having Westbrook means they had to completely abandon the center position, as we
Correct.
know it. And look, to their credit, they really did make it work. Basically, clearing the lane for Westbrook is the perfect situation for Westbrook, even for Harden, because once he beats you off the dribble, if there's nobody at the rim to help, it's layups, layup after layup after layup. If you're late on the help, you'll foul him, and he's automatic at the line. Westbrook's issue, and look, he is a phenom. He's one of the most physically gifted basketballers I've ever seen in my life.
I've never denied that he's not athletic. Yeah. He's athletic.
He's a wrecking ball. But the biggest problem with Westbrook is
he doesn't get it.
Well, it's a lack of evolution. He's been the same player at 21 than he is now at 31. And for better or worse, he always thinks that he's the best player on the floor. Every player that comes into the NBA, I can guarantee they were the best player on their high school team, and they were probably the best player on their college team or their international team, wherever they've come from. But they all come to the realization at some point that there is probably someone better, and there's probably someone better within their own squad. Westbrook has had Durant, he's had Harden as teammates. He has never, ever, ever considered that they might be better than him. That's how we get to that free throw line jumper that barely made it halfway in game 6?
Yes.
I think it was game 6.
His decision-making drives me insane.
Yes.
It's not as big of a deal when there's, it's the second quarter and there's 4 minutes left. I don't know how you can trust that guy with a minute left and the ball in his hands.
You can't, because he thinks he
Never
can make the shot. He really does think he can make the shot. And, that falls on Westbrook, but that also falls on Harden and D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni's the fucking coach. He's got to have the balls to say, Russ, if you don't pass that ball to James and get the hell out of his way, or set a screen for him and roll, then I'm yanking you out of this game. And for Harden is, he's an MVP. He's a 3-time runner-up in the MVP, 3-time scoring champion. He's got to say, in the timeout before they come back onto the floor and run that last play, my ball. I got this. You guys get out of the way. You just let me cook. And if Westbrook says, no, I got this. You go, no, you haven't, Russell. Back the fuck up. I'm James Harden. I've got this. No, Russell, you're not listening, Russell. Russell, shut up. I've got this. Yeah, he's got to have the balls to say, this is my team. I will take this last shot. And if I miss, it's on me. But I'm more likely to make it than you are. So, yes, it's on Russell, but it's also blame to go around with other people who need to control Russell Westbrook's worst urges.
I just think, like, when I watch the games, Oklahoma City and other teams do not respect Russell Westbrook's ability to shoot. And
Should they.
It completely destroyed. Like, the help defense on James Harden was so good that they needed that second guy like a Westbrook to say, hey, I can make a shot every here once in a while. They can't rely on that ever.
Yeah. I'd love to see them run more pick and roll with him and just have him as essentially as a 6'4" Capella. Because he's not going to be a pick and pop guy, clearly. If you're going to let him go one-on-one, that's great because you'll have 4 shooters spotted around him and theoretically, there won't be help at the rim. But if Harden's going one-on-one with Westbrook on the floor, there's always going to be help at the rim. You or I could stand off Westbrook and be fairly confident he's not going to torch us from the arc. So fair enough.
Even the mid-range,
at least we'd be there.
His mid-range jumper. I mean, he shoots air balls half the time. He's not close.
Well, that Game 6 jumper, look. I coach 10-year-olds, and I've seen 10-year-olds make that shot with more consistency. He's just such an awful jump shooter, and the shame is that he pulls up for that because he's an excellent finisher at the rim.
He constantly shoots that mid-range jumper.
Yeah. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that because remember, he has had a few injuries when he was younger. Maybe it's the fact that he is getting older. Maybe he feels like he's lost a little bit of that step or that pop, that ability to get up and over people. But he's a good enough free throw shooter that he needs to just take it, let them barrel into those big linebacker shoulders of his and get to the free throw line.
His best plays happen when he just sticks his nose down and he drives to the rim. And he should never do anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, variety is the spice of life, but, some of those spices aren't very nice.
I also think his
needs to go.
Yeah. His playmaking ability is so overrated to me. He piles up the assists because his usage rate is through the roof, not because he's the guy that takes care of the basketball.
And they're all last-ditch passes as well. I've driven to the hoop. I've got 3 players on me, so that means 2 players are open.
Yeah.
And so it's basically a 50-50 chance whether he passes to an open guy or not. And that was how we got a lot of the assists in OKC.
Right.
And we talked about Russell controlling his worst urges. His worst urges come from those post-KD seasons where he was allowed to do whatever the hell he wanted, for better or worse. It won him an MVP. That should have been Harden's MVP. But it's in the record books. He got an MVP out of that season. He got a triple-double season out of that campaign. But it turned him into a worse basketballer.
You can't give him $40-some million and for him to play however he wants and for you to expect to go far in the playoffs.
No, he needs to be a complimentary. Like he can be a very good second star even now, but you need to give him a very, very defined role. And I don't know if D'Antoni's the coach to do that. I just think he's a little bit too freewheeling, a bit too freelance in the way he coaches.
One of the biggest ones to me was when Victor Oladipo, that during that Westbrook season where he just took everything and his usage rate was through the roof. He took every shot in the world. I thought Oladipo was a good player, and he just never had any opportunity to do anything. And the second he got traded, is like, this guy can play. Or Sabonis, he can play.
Yep. I was about to say Sabonis has turned into an all-star as well. They literally managed to trade Serge Ibaka for 2 all-stars, but they just didn't realize they had 2 all-stars on their roster. You talk about a big 3. Imagine a big 3 of, with the athleticism of Depot and Westbrook in the backcourt, and the brilliant, brilliant passing of Sabonis from the high post to set them up off back screens and whatnot. Man, that'd be unstoppable.
I don't know what's going on in my basement down here. Can you hear that noise or no?
No.
You can't hear anything?
No,
All right, good. Never mind.
I think you're going crazy.
Yeah, there's like a thing going on down here. I just couldn't tell if you could hear it. Never mind. But like the other problem I have is like the guys don't shine around him. Like I don't see like he's this triple double guy that collects a lot of assists. Where are the guys that he's making better? Where are the guys like Oladipo that are supposed to shine with him?
Well, I think it shows that Depot and Sabonis are the prime example of guys that have gone away from him and gotten better.
Not just really, a little bit.
Oh yeah, they've improved exponentially.
So you're with me. You don't think I'm crazy here?
No, I think you are probably a little bit over the top in your criticism of Westbrook, but there's some major issues with the guy. I really think a genuine second-tier superstar is still in there, but he needs the right structure and the right coaching, and he does not get that with Houston.
I haven't seen him get it anywhere except when Durant's there and he has no choice.
That's a good point. He didn't really get it the back half of his OKC career either, and that's grown into the evolution of the player that we have now.
The thing was, I've been told the last 3 years that Billy Donovan can't coach, but now somehow
Billy Donovan can coach.
But now somehow he can coach this year. What's really changed?
Yep. Now Billy Donovan can coach, man. He's really, really good. But again, he doesn't have to build a heliocentric offense around a guy who is not worth having a heliocentric offense built around him now. He can be more equal opportunity, and look what's happened. He's gotten an unfancied team to within a James Harden defensive play of all things of the second round.
See, you heard it here. Our Australian Zach Lowe says, I'm not crazy when it comes to Westbrook.
He's slightly crazy. No, for what it's worth, I think Westbrook's very, very good, but I just think he's not used correctly. It's probably the best way to put it.